This was tremendously inspiring. Thanks, Morgan. That was just amazing. And thanks to Louis and to Winslow and all the good people here at the China-US Forum for asking me to come here and speak today. I'm tremendously honored. There's nothing better for the bilateral relationship than this kind of sustained, ever-deepening people-to-people contact that we have through travel, through study, through work, through business exchanges and things like this. This is all terrific. I know these are all issues that are going to be discussed in depth later today during the forum. And I'm very, very much cheered by this. The theme of the forum is, of course, crossing borders and physically crossing borders, getting more and more people to study, to work, to live in people from one country living and working in the other is, to be sure, a wonderful start. And it all contributes to the building of those bridges, whether or not one actually consciously takes up the enterprise of bridge building. But looking around me here in this room, I mean, the fact that you're here suggests that you do want to take up that mission consciously. And those of us who dedicate ourselves to that mission, we actually face great difficulties. We face really great challenges, especially here in recent years, in this time of tension, in this time of eroding trust. It's really not enough just to aspire to empathy. It's not enough just to try to encourage others to be empathic, to encourage that kind of behavior in others. We actually have a lot of hard intellectual work to do if we want to understand the view from behind the eyes of the other. We have to really have the courage, it's kind of a moral courage to confront our own prejudices, our own privileges, our own baked-in narratives and our own perspectives. We need to do this on both sides, not just the Americans, but Chinese as well. We need to understand how our own behaviors as individuals, as institutions, even as states, how those actually are perceived by the other, how those perceptions in turn shape the behavior of the other. Sadly, I have met very, very few people who are actually capable of doing this. Routinely, I'm meeting people who really lack this ability, and here especially. I mean, I'm not talking just about here in Washington, but in Beijing as well. There is a lack of what is called security dilemma sensibility, the ability to see how your own behavior actually affects the calculations of the other side. We end up in these spirals of negativity, which are positively dangerous. The sensitivities that we can acquire, and there's no better. These are sensitivities that we can actually acquire, and there's no better way again than by living in the other country, by actually, as we say, crossing borders. It's an opportunity that many of us have here. All the Chinese people in this room now have. Many of the non-ethnically Chinese people have had that opportunity to live in China, but it's an opportunity that often goes squandered. If you are an American and you're living in China and you are in that little expatriate bubble and you're not making deep, lasting friendships with Chinese people, you're squandering that opportunity. You're not learning that empathy, that massive skill of informed empathy that's so crucial to it. And nor is the Chinese person who comes to the United States and spends all their time only among other Chinese people, really, and I fear too many Chinese people in America are doing that, after all, hanging out only in, well, I guess the latest one is Rockville, Maryland, right? Somebody told me that Rockville, Maryland, the Chinese name for it is Shijiazhuang, which is perfect, right? It's kind of like a perfect name. Anyway, too often I hear Chinese people speak very dismissively of American history as sort of too short to warrant serious study. No, this is a problem. I often hear Chinese people, even if they intend it as a compliment, they sort of dismiss Americans as facile, as straightforward. They mean it as a compliment, but they're dendron, right? This is actually not helpful in our understanding of these people. We need to really get beyond that. It's a real difficult thing. The pride that many Chinese people have in the psychological complexity of their national culture maybe it's quite warranted, you know, the sophistication and the trickiness that we all learned from reading 三国演义 when we were kids. We may, you know, the pride in that may be perfectly well warranted, but I think that it can assume proportions that are dangerously arrogant. I've seen this often. In fact, I think it's fair to say that both Chinese and Americans subscribe to a kind of exceptionalism. They take very different forms. American exceptionalism says that American values, American institutions are universal, ultimately universal, or applicable to all the countries of the world. And there, of course, a non-American might very well see that as a form of arrogance. But Chinese exceptionalism is equally arrogant. It just takes a different form. It just says that the Chinese experience is utterly unique, that Chinese values, Chinese institutions, Chinese cultural habits of mind, these are specific only to China. That is an equally closed off and narrow idea, and it's one that's dead wrong. Time and again, I come back to the importance of history. We cannot truly understand one another if we do not wrestle with our respective histories. To understand why the values of the political culture of these two nations have diverged, are as different as they are. It's just not enough for me, for example, as an American, just to study the history of China. In fact, I really need to turn my eyes inward. I need to understand American history in the broader context of Western history. And I need to understand that it was in no sense inevitable that things should have unfolded as they did, that the emergence of these cherished American values was actually, in fact, very historically contingent, that we made it across many very narrow defiles, that it did not have to turn out the way that it did, and in fact that we are very much an exception. And that these values, these cherished liberal values, remain very fragile. If you don't believe me, I mean, if the last few months of the American electoral process haven't convinced you of the fragility of these values, then I don't know what can. But while it has been a great start for Chinese students to get past this notion that American history is, like I said, too short to merit serious examination, and to situate the U.S. in the larger context of the West's history, even this is really quite frustratingly rare among Chinese. It's important, it's even more important that Chinese have a clear-eyed view of their own history, that they really wrestle with the difficulties of that history, and not just simply repeat the platitudes that they have been taught. If they are to bear weight and to endure the bridges that we are trying to build, they are not haphazardly erected just from one side out across the water in the blind hope that they're going to find stable ground on the other, or that maybe it will miraculously join up by bridge builders from the other, and that it will meet somehow in the middle. No, actually, these are very difficult feats of engineering, this whole bridge building endeavor. It requires knowledge of the terrain on both sides of the river. When they're built right, though, they really can link up worlds. They can unlock the boundless potential of human interchange, and I think that's what we're all here to do, is to build solid, usable bridges. So thanks very much. I wish the China-US Forum tremendous success today and many more years of success. Thank you all for having me.